Imagine waking up every single day knowing that a simple toothache, a small cut, or even a bad meal could kill you before sunset. No doctors, no painkillers, no safety, just fear, hunger, and suffering as part of daily life. If you enjoy dark history and shocking truths that schools never teach, gently tap the like button and subscribe. It helps this channel survive in a world far kinder than the medieval one you're about to enter. Because once you understand how people truly lived back then, you'll never complain about modern life again. Life in medieval times was a relentless struggle against hunger, disease, and unimaginable filth. For most people, especially peasants, food insecurity was not an occasional hardship. It was a permanent condition. Harvests depended entirely on weather, and a single cold summer or heavy rain could wipe out an entire year's food supply. When crops failed, starvation followed quickly and brutally. There were no government aid programs, no food banks, and no international relief. People simply starved. Bread, the most basic staple, was often made from poor quality grain, mixed with dirt, insects, or even sawdust. Meat was a luxury rarely enjoyed by the lower classes. Protein mostly came from thin soups or scraps, and during famine years, people resorted to eating grass, tree bark, rats, and sometimes even corpses. Historical records describe entire villages disappearing after prolonged starvation. Clean water was another deadly problem. Rivers and wells were frequently contaminated with human waste, animal carcasses, and industrial runoff from tanning and metalwork. Drinking water often carried deadly bacteria, leading to outbreaks of dysentery, cholera, and typhoid. People had no understanding of germs. They believed disease was caused by bad air, evil spirits, or divine punishment. Personal hygiene was almost non-existent. Most people bathed only a few times a year, if at all. Clothes were rarely washed and often infested with lice, fleas, and bedbugs. These parasites spread deadly diseases like typhus and the bubonic plague. The infamous Black Death alone wiped out nearly half of Europe's population in the 14th century. Cities were especially horrifying. Streets were narrow, crowded, and filled with garbage. Human waste was dumped directly outside homes or thrown from windows. Animals roamed freely, feeding on trash and spreading disease. The smell was overwhelming, a toxic mixture of rotting food, waste, smoke, and death. Medical knowledge was dangerously primitive. Doctors believed bloodletting could cure illness, so they drained patients of blood using leeches or knives, often killing them faster than the disease itself. Surgery was performed without anesthesia. Infections were common, and survival was rare. Even childbirth was extremely dangerous. Many women died giving birth, and infant mortality rates were horrifyingly high. Living in medieval times meant constantly being sick, hungry, and dirty, and knowing that at any moment your body could simply give up. Violence was a normal part of medieval life. There were no police forces as we know them today, no emergency services, and very little protection for ordinary people. If you were attacked, robbed, or murdered, chances were high that no one would ever be punished. Wars were frequent and devastating. Kingdoms constantly fought over land, power, and religion. Armies marched through villages, stealing food, burning homes, and killing civilians without mercy. Peasants were often forced to fight in wars they didn't understand, using crude weapons and little training. Survival was unlikely. Even during times of peace, daily life was dangerous. Roads were filled with bandits. Traveling even a short distance risked robbery, assault, or death. Most people never traveled far from where they were born, not by choice, but by fear. Justice was cruel and unpredictable. Laws favored the rich and powerful. A noble could commit crimes with little consequence, while peasants were punished harshly for minor offenses. Torture was commonly used to extract confessions, even from innocent people. Punishments included public executions, mutilation, branding, and imprisonment in horrific conditions. Castles, often romanticized today, were not safe havens for most people. They were military structures, not comfortable homes. In times of siege, inhabitants suffered terribly. Food ran out. Disease spread rapidly. People resorted to eating animals, leather, and sometimes each other. Siege warfare was slow, brutal, and merciless. Religious authority added another layer of fear. The church controlled much of daily life and enforced strict rules. Being accused of heresy or witchcraft could lead to torture and execution. Evidence was often irrelevant. Rumors and accusations were enough to destroy lives. There was no concept of human rights. Life had little value, especially if you were poor. Death was public, violent, and common. Children grew up watching executions as entertainment. Fear was not occasional. It was constant. In medieval times, survival often depended not on skill or intelligence, but on pure luck. Perhaps the most brutal reality of medieval life was how short and hopeless it was. The average life expectancy was shockingly low, often between 30 and 40 years, and that number is misleading. Many people never reached adulthood. Infant mortality was incredibly high, and childhood was filled with disease, malnutrition, and danger. There was no social mobility. If you were born a peasant, you would die a peasant. Your future was decided at birth. Education was rare and reserved for clergy and nobles. Most people could not read or write. Knowledge was controlled by the elite. Work was exhausting and endless. Peasants worked from sunrise to sunset, performing physically demanding labor with no days off except religious holidays. Injuries were common, and an injury often meant death. There was no workers' compensation, no health care, no safety regulations. Women suffered the most. They had almost no rights and were expected to marry young, bear many children, and obey their husbands completely. Domestic violence was socially accepted. Pregnancy was life-threatening, and many women died young after multiple childbirths. Entertainment was limited and often cruel. Public executions, animal fights, and brutal games were common. Life was not about happiness. It was about survival. There was little hope for improvement. People believed their suffering was part of God's plan. Questioning authority or tradition was dangerous. Fear of hell was used to control behavior. Even death was not an escape, as people feared eternal punishment. Modern life, with all its problems, would seem like paradise to someone living in medieval times. Clean water, medicine, freedom, and safety are luxuries they could never imagine. Medieval life was not romantic. It was not heroic. It was brutal, painful, and unforgiving.